And when I had that first toke of a spliff when I was 12 in that park, this weight on my shoulders just disappeared and I felt fucking amazing. Every time I smoked weed, I felt like that. 3 friends pulled me out of a hotel room. I disappeared for 2 days. In the hotel room was a lot of drugs and a bathtub, a Stanley knife. I just broke down. I said, I don't know who I am anymore. I can't go home. I'm scared of my wife and kids. I've got a tribe of people that have been missing all my life that think just like me. Recovery has given me this peace of mind for start. Peace of mind that there are thousands of people just like me.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Nigel. Hi fellow 12 Steppers, welcome to this edition of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. You all know the drill by now. Please rate and review the show. And if you'd like to be on 12 Steps and 12 Questions, ping me an email on 12steps12questions@gmail.com. And without further ado, let's get to our guest today. Nigel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Sylvia. Yeah, thanks for having me on board. I've got to say, what a wonderful platform you've created here. Marvelous work. Grateful to be on board. My name is Nigel. I am an addict. I am a grateful member of the Cocaine Anonymous Fellowship community. My sobriety date is the 31st of July, 2023. What else to say? I'm born in Watford. I have 2 lovely daughters, 5 and just turned 8. And a wife and a partner that I've been with for 23 years. I would say those are the main things: my fellowship, my family, and the enlightenment of walking on a spiritual path.
Wow, well said. What an introduction as well. I'd just like to note that I didn't pay Nigel to say nice things about me. He did this of his own accord.
Can you later?
We're not a glum lot. Absolutely not. So let's get to it. The first question out of the 12 questions I ask every guest on this show is, Nigel, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
A part of me wants to say I don't know. A part of me wants to say I do know. And a part of me realizes that I'll just answer the question. And I can relate to how my very first memories as a child is being scared. And one of my first memories is clinging onto my mother's leg at what must have been a nursery or something along those lines. I was quite needy in the sense that I was always scared of other people. And my mum would be my first go-to for warmth, for solace, for protection. And my mother did an amazing job at that when I was young. She was really, her cuddles, her warmth, the things she would say to me, the simple look in her eye. And I reflect on it, and it must have been just a look of real fear whenever I looked at my mum from my first memories. And I remember constantly thinking a lot as a child about things, non-stop.
Preoccupation? Yeah, as in, it sounds like you were preoccupied.
Yeah, I was preoccupied, and not obviously, but I'm grateful that I'm aware of all of that nonsense now. I'm bloody good at overthinking things, and it turns out I've been bloody good at it at a very young age.
I think we could possibly open a little expert forum here, between the two of us on overthinking.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing I find beautiful about the fellowship. I love hearing about other people's overthinking because it brings out my overthinking. It brings out memories and an understanding, a learning, a knowledge, a nugget of knowledge of how I would do that, And to hear the honesty in somebody else's is, I feel that's our superpower, really. That's our magic power in the fellowship. And as an addict, being honest about all of that madness in our head. And, my father's a loving man. It just took me 44 years to accept and understand what his version of love looks like. It never looked the way I want it to look.
What did it look like?
Well,
when you were a kid in particular?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a child, my father his form of discipline would be quite heavy-handed. It would be it'd be a slipper or a belt or a feather duster. And it's quite violent, I remember those memories of him walking through the door when I'm at primary school. We're talking about 7 years old now. Seven till 13. There was always a guessing game for an hour when I got back from school and when he walked through the front door. And more often than not, his mood would be one full of character defects, which I'm aware of now. But back then, it would just simply be, better watch what I say. No, fuck it, I'll say that just to wind him up. Be a combination of those. It grew more into that when I was a young teenager. But at first, I had memories of, hiding behind the sofa in our first family home. And he would be quite abusive to my mother verbally and kind of at life, because he worked hard. One thing that I can definitely say about my father, he worked very, very hard. He's a typical 9 to 5:30. He's the archetypal type. He did provide for his family financially, but I always remember this void, this vacuum in the family home. Nothing was spoken of much. An incident might occur, one of violence or one of extreme vocal tension in the house with my mother, my sister, and my father, a combination of one or two, all four involved. And it'd never be spoken about the next day. And I found that puzzling and baffling. I found that rather bizarre. And I'd look at other families and other friends and other parents and other mothers and other fathers and other sisters and other brothers. And I would just simply fill that void with, they don't behave like that. So I was very good at feeling different at a very young age. And the truth is, a lot of households are like that, But I'm a firm believer that in our fellowship, most households of ones that follow a program, they're not like that. Because I tell my kids now when they're annoying me, I apologize to my kids when I shout at them. Don't get me wrong, I get it wrong. I do still see rage. I'm imperfect, and I appreciate and I'm grateful and I accept that I'm imperfect. And we've got those tools to kind of address it. But when I was a child, all these things would really play up in me. I never asked for help, or I never shared these types of conversations, whether it be with other kids at school, teachers, other family friends.
It's not really a done thing, though, is it?
No, and I think culturally as well, like I'm not making excuses, but I can see my part to play as well as their part to play as a child and with the parents I had. They come from a generation, my father's from Hong Kong. He came here to study when he was 16. He's been here since. He's quite the professional. He's obviously retired now. My mother, who passed away 2 years ago, she also, she came here, studied at the age of 16, but they're Chinese and they follow a certain protocol in their own upbringing. They were just, I think, picking the bits that they thought was a way to bring up their own children.
Yeah. Do you know, there's quite a lot of similarities here. The fact that I describe my father as a dry drunk, because he might not have been, but it's what my understanding of it, and the way he behaves is quite close to what we would describe a dry drunk, And this is not to judge his experience or anything. It's just for me to be able to communicate my experience of him, not at all times, but at certain times, right? And I'm also a third culture kid, like you are. And that means that one, I think there is a greater distance between our parents and their experience and myself, right? I did not grow up in Italy, right? I grew up in Germany. You did not grow up in Hong Kong. You grew up in Watford, by the sounds of it, right? Or the UK in any case. So their experience and the values that they have taken into their lives and so on is not just a generational divide, it's also a regional divide or a geographical divide, if you will, right? Because my parents grew up in the sort of 40s and 50s, 30s, 40s, really, in Italy, in southern Italy. That's miles away from 1980s Germany. I mean, in any which way, and I'm sure it's the same for you, right? So do you find that this may have influenced all of the things that you just said?
Yeah, totally. I think because I firmly believe as addicts, we've got this innate ability to find a difference in ourselves with others, even in the rooms. You know, I'm really good. It's similar to how I would identify that I'm the only Chinaman in the classroom. I could identify I'm the only Chinaman in this CA room, but I know it's nonsense in my head. You know, I know it's blocking me from being present, but it did a bloody good job when I was a kid. I was very blocked in my house. I was very blocked with the things that I would share to my parents and my sister. I was very much blocked with being present in the classroom, you know. Like I remember when, you know, in English grammar, English lit, we'd go around the class and everybody reads from the book, from a book.
Not from the book.
But not from the book. We'd read from a piece of literature. And as it gets closer to me, I'm shitting myself. Because it's funny, because I know now it's just making it about me. I'm just one of 22 kids in the class reading a paragraph in a book. No different, no less, no more. We could all read, thankfully. But I would make this thing was, it's going to be me next. I'll start thinking of excuses. I've got a stomach ache. I need to go to the bathroom. You know, saying any excuse to not read. And it's the same. It's the same as a confident, a brashly confident 30-year-old. I would make things about me if I walk into a club. So that same ego and addict in me that walks into a nightclub with 1,000 people in, is the same addict and ego talking to me with self-pity in a classroom when I'm 20.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting how we can sort of connect these dots, you know. There is one thing, though, and before we move on to question 2, but, you know, just because maybe this sort of heritage thing is something that, you know, even though wildly different, we share, I was genuinely, as much as I make everything about me, and you're absolutely right that this is just one of the major characteristics that we have as addicts, right? I'd agree with that. Nonetheless, I suffered from some genuine confusion about who I am, some sort of identity crisis when I was a child, because I was neither German nor was I Italian. And in the end, I just ended up becoming more and more foreign, and then lived further away, and then moved to France, and it ended up going somewhere totally different, where in the end, it doesn't really matter anymore where I come from. And it fortified this idea that I'm different and special. Yeah, because that was very dear to me. You know, that nobody can take this away from me. That look at me, I am so different and special, right?
Oh, so
I'm not, right? Yeah. But did this contribute to that part of you as well?
Massively. I remember when I went to Hong Kong as a 12-year-old, I was maybe a bit more of a grown-up teenager. I was 14, 15 maybe, and it was a family trip to Hong Kong. And I think to myself, I'm a Londoner. I'm different to these lot. Like, I could be Bruce Lee and I could be Hugh Grant all at the same time. I used to have this inflated sense of self, thinking. Meanwhile, I've barely done any taekwondo lessons or any acting lessons, and I would think that I'm that great. So, yeah. But on the flip side, it's funny because as a British-born Chinese person, I didn't have many Chinese friends, if any. My Cantonese ain't great. My Cockney's brilliant. Yet if I walked into a pub with 100 white Caucasians, I'd feel different. And if I walked into a family dinner with 100 British-born Chinese people, again, I'd feel different. So it's polarized for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that quite a bit. It's going to take a long, long time for me to undo and unsee this mixture between Bruce Lee and Hugh Grant whenever I see you. But, that
Did I just use those two names? I'm such a dick.
that one's well planted. Let's move on to our question 2. So here you are, you quite a complex upbringing, complex relationship with the world, or, for what is someone who is 8, 9, 10 years old, it's quite a complex, I think it's a complex relationship with the world. And at some point, and that is our question 2, something gets introduced into your life that makes you feel different. So what did the moment you first got hooked and or the fun times, if there were any, what did that look like?
So, whenever I think about my alteration, I always review now that I never said no to anything. So, the first time I had a cigarette I was 9 and I pestered my auntie to give me a take on a cigarette. This is in Hong Kong. I'm 9 years old. I have a take, I inhale, and I'm coughing my guts out. And then I remember the first time I had a drink. Again, it was my auntie on the same holiday. Like a couple of days later, I pestered her for a sip of a beer, and I had one. And then the first time I was offered weed in Elstree and Borehamwood Park in the summer of 1993. I was 12 years old. And my first inhalation of marijuana, all of those thoughts that I'd walk around, nobody likes me, I'm amazing, the teachers, my parents, people don't know what goes on in my home, people don't know what I think in the classroom. And I'll quickly, for 15 seconds, just give you an idea of the crap in my head and how marijuana relieved me of it. When I was 11 in secondary school, my first PE lesson, you get changed, you're naked. And my PE teacher looked at me in a way that just did not sit well with me. And for months, I had this image of chopping his head off and sticking it in a pickle jar. It sounds mad because it was mad. He's not dead. He's not, I never chopped his head off. I never did any harm to him. In fact, I grew quite a close connection with him as I got older. But that was the madness in my head, and it would be on me. Every time I got a PE lesson, that morning I'd wake up in fear. In the PE lesson, I couldn't concentrate. All of this stuff. And when I had that first toke of a spliff when I was 12 in that park, this weight on my shoulders just disappeared and I felt fucking amazing. And every time I smoked weed, I felt like that. Weed is my real go-to for letting go of everything.
You're not alone in that. Now, just very quickly, to avoid any misunderstanding, your PE teacher, when you said that they looked at you funny,
He did nothing wrong.
Right, okay, but what did you read from his view? Was it sort of sexually abusive, or was it that he didn't like you, or that you looked weird?
I've always had, again, I didn't mention this, but when I was clinging onto my mum's leg as a 4-year-old or 3-year-old, I just didn't like the way adults looked at me. I just didn't like the way other kids in the nursery looked at me. I just didn't like how people looked at me, and I fill in that void of what they're thinking. They like me, they dislike me, they want to kidnap me, they want to beat me up. They don't want to be my friends. They're telling me things that I want to hear, but really they're lying. All of that stuff. And even as an adult, I think that way.
So disapproval from others was huge.
Yeah, and I just fill in any unknown with negativity. And then as I grew older and relied on the drugs, I'd fill in any unknown with an absolute grandiose version of me, you know? You're looking at me because you want to sleep with me. You're looking at me because you want to be me. You're looking at me because I'm better than you. And at the flip side, it would be the exact opposite. You're looking at me because you hate me. You're looking at me because you don't want to sleep with me. You look at me because I'm useless. Filling only unknown with quite inflated opinions of thinking I'm psychic, knowing what they're thinking and feeling. And we'd get rid of all of that.
Yeah, it's a classic combination, isn't it, of sort of very low self-worth and a sort of ginormous childish ego, really. Yeah, of like, I'm so brilliant, and how come not everyone isn't fainting when I walk into the room? Is that sort of thing.
And that's it, though, isn't it? It's like it's taken me 44 years to realize it's the same version, that self-pity character defect or that brash ego. The me I am, I'm fucking amazing. That's obvious ego. And a lot of people relate to the word ego I as that. Whereas it's just exactly the same as the poor me. You think I'm useless. You don't like me. You don't want to sleep with me. You think I'm this, that, and the other. It's the same nonsense.
Now, so you're having this, your first weed in the park, and it's a good experience. You're having a good time, and so on. How did that progress? Where did that go from there? We're still with the good times. We're not suffering any consequences yet. What did that look like?
I found myself. I felt like I found myself. I felt as I was that kid. I would use, I was very good at skinning things up and all sorts of smoking utensils, bongs, windmills, tulips, using 12 Rizzler, and it was fun. We'd smoke weed in the park in the summer holidays, the school holidays. We'd meet up. There'd be a mixture of girls and boys. Girls and boys would do girl and boy things at 12 to 16 years old. We go out in town, we go clubbing, we go to these events called black tie balls. So in North London, there were these events for under 18-year-olds. And we go to these black tie balls, and I'd be sending tickets for these events. It'd be amazing. I'm grateful for my youth. I'm grateful for that experience that I had. I did a lot of adult things at a young age. And I thought to show off, it was a learning. But then it felt like a void when I got to uni.
It's a bit like Bill saying, you're part of life at last, right? So
yeah, I felt like I found a tribe.
Yeah. And I think, this is not, I think that most teenagers in one way or another go through this. I don't think that this is necessarily just related to us addicts. It's just that we sort of blow everything up and, beyond any sort of reasonable and rational proportions, of course, But did you at that time then, if we just stick to substances and behaviors, was this the only substance that you were using at the time? And did you become an expert at this? It sounds like you did right away.
I would smoke weed pretty much every week. It never got to a point where I had to finish the last bud. When I was a child, the addiction side of things wasn't there, but it was always there, bubbling away. But it was the start of the ego in the more familiar sense of the masks of getting things done and manipulating the things. So the more I would smoke weed, the more confident I grew. And the more their versions of me. This is me being friendly with women. This is me being friendly with guys. This is me being confident. This is my aggressive self. And through my reliance of weed and through this firm belief that I need to live in these ways that are versions of me, I quickly grew different types of me. Different types of Nigel. I hate talking about myself in the third person, but I really was living in the third person. There was Nigel at uni, there was Nigel with relatives, there was Nigel with family, there was Nigel with family friends, there was Nigel with my snooker friends. And of all these places, I would always say yes. In terms of that dark side of the world and that dark side of my life, I love my snooker, I love my pool. And as a kid, I went to lots of different pubs because I was a very good billiards player. I was very good at cue sports. And I was offered my first line of speed at the age of 15, playing for a pool team at the pub around the corner to my family's house. And I fucking loved it. I loved that nervous, twitchy sweat and gurn. It's bizarre. It's bizarre, but I actually liked it.
I loved it. It's inexplicable to the outside world, but yeah.
It makes no sense. I love that uncomfortability, that nervousness that came with a line of speed. And And I was late to cocaine. I went through university somehow. I only took a couple of lines here or there. But then I remember my first, it's hard to explain. I remember my first real line of cocaine. I think I was 21. I met a school friend that I'd not seen for a few years at a bar in Camden. And I took that line and I sweated profusely. My guts went, so it must have been good. My guts went, I sweated profusely. I felt a little bit sick, but it saved me up a little bit. And then after that initial kind of reaction of the body came in, I just grew this real cocksure brashness. You know, I was trying on with everything in sight. And in my head, there would be a validation of if it wasn't a success, it was kind of their loss. It's quite tragic, really.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it sort of very sober years later, it is very tragic, but it's also very common, you know, and it's important that we share it, I think. I can certainly relate to what happens the moment you're sort of, after your body reacts and so on, whatever it might be, you know, you get the sweats or worse or whatever it is. And then there comes that moment where you feel bigger than you are, you feel taller, right? And, you know, yes, often, not always, but often, you know, your thoughts immediately go, okay, cool. You know, who can I hit on? Right. It's not very nice, really, is it? But what is interesting is that sometimes I think this is what I'm hearing is that not always when we try something the first time does it have that effect that we then later on come to rely on, you know, of that ease and comfort coming into our lives of it doing it. That sometimes I remember, for instance, I tried cocaine in my late teens, early 20s for the first time, and I just felt it was a bit meh. Right? I was much more interested in other stuff then. It was only later that I started really, quote unquote, that it hit me, that it filled that particular hole, you know, that it sort of completed me in a way, quote unquote, that would make me addicted to it, right? So not always does it sort of, is it a love at first sight sort of affair?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is something that I've come to realize from my own experience. And it sounds a bit like you tried it a few times beforehand and then,
I think
then it hit.
whatever drug it was, so it was marijuana, a little bit of speed, then cocaine. And by then I'm in my mid-20s. The one thing that everything did, even alcohol. Now I'm one of those Asians with, I don't have the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase. So I get red flush. You know, I'm one of them Asian flush, red-faced alcoholic drinkers, so I can't break down alcohol. So I actually do have a real allergy to alcohol. Thank God, because like if I could consume alcohol without being allergic to it physically in that sense, rather than in the big book sense, then God, who knows? But all of those drugs and alcohol and all those mind-altering do the same thing. They would remove from me that sense of feeling that I had within me. And it was always better, even if it was sweating and being weird, or if it was being completely euphoric with the euphoric drugs and the chill out drugs, it would just do this job of changing the way what I felt. And I always wanted to change the way I feel, ever since clinging onto my mum's leg at the age of 3.
Yeah. And I'm going to stick my neck out and guess that you had no awareness of this at the time, of course. You know, there's no way of knowing that, really, was there?
No, I just I felt, well, nobody else thinks like this. I had these skeletons and secrets in my head that weren't really, I mean, I have skeletons and secrets. Well, I did, you know, but it was the everyday stuff. It's like, actually, no, this is just life and living. I was scared of living.
Now, our question 3 is, what were your worst consequences and finally your rock bottom? So this might include you fast forwarding just a little bit here and there. But how did it progress until, you know, I mean, I met you on the Breakfast Club, the CA meeting.
What a beautiful meeting it is, yeah.
Big shout out to the Breakfast Club one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is where I got to know you. I think I was hosting at the time, if I remember it well.
You were.
And I saw you come in. So this is, I don't know how long ago, some time ago, a year and a half or something. And what happened, in that bit, that the consequences coming in, getting worse, and then surrendering? How did that play out?
That's a massive question. I think in reality, I would say, the truth is, from 13 till 43, till I found the rooms, I was just slowly leading to a path. Because I'd want to run the show. It's the same story. These things are working for me. I'm building a character and a version of me that's not really true to myself, that's effective. It's helping me find a partner. It's helping me get a good job. It's helping me get good income. It's helping me get the house, help get the car. And they all come along. And I think it was ebbing away. My ego, I remember when I got promoted to being a director at work when I was 30 years old. I was a very young sales manager, really, but I was part of the leadership team, and I celebrated by taking cocaine. And overnight, my cocaine usage increased significantly. So when you get those wins, I took more. So when I got those wins, I took more. And that's when I started struggling with it. And I could always put it away at that stage, but very quickly I couldn't.
When you say put it away, because this is my experience and was my experience as well, when you say put it away, how long were you able to put it away for? Because I was able, depending on when we're talking, I was able to go with a week, 8-9 days. I'd be white knuckling. I'd be thinking of cocaine every single day, morning and night, but I was able to not take it for that time. Was that similar? And then, of course, it was less and less and less.
I mean, with the weed, I could smoke fuckloads like I did at uni. I went to a place called Bristol where there's a university where I just got stoned. I was never there. But with the cocaine, I could leave it. I remember the first 5 years or so, I might go a couple of months not taking it, and then I might have a full weekend where it's 2 days in a row. But there were many, many occasions where it'd still be in my wallet or left at home, and then I'd bring it back out on the weekend. But somewhere along the lines, it was really that point in time where my ego got that real big inflation, that real, I'm the first Asian sales manager of its type in this industry that I was working in, this, that, and the other, whatever bullshit accolades I placed on myself and still might do today. That inflated sense of self, from there on, it became very hard, very, very quickly. And I was doing it in the daytime at work, and it was affecting my work. And I lost that bravery and sense of courage whenever I do a sales pitch. It got on with this little voice in my head going, "You're no good, you need this. It was chewing up inside me. And it cooled away, just vapored away slightly, ever so slightly, bit by bit, percentage by percentage, month by month. Then my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And that's all the excuse I needed. I don't say that disrespectfully to my mother. I love my mother. She's my first form of a higher power, in reality.
Yeah.
By sheer biological nature. But I used and abused her illness and her death to really fuck myself up,
Can I stop you there?
Please.
This is something that is, let me caveat this, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, and this is a good moment to maybe explore this just very quickly, slightly off script. When trauma comes into our life, right? Trauma came into my life, right? And we lost an unborn child, okay? For me, I was so beside myself with pain over this incident, over this loss, right? That I couldn't really help myself. So it wasn't this, and then we speak of using it as an excuse to use. And I know excuses to use. Don't get me wrong. Oh, this is not going my way. Oh, this is such a terrible situation, this, that, and the other. But when real trauma comes into your life, can we still speak of an excuse to use? Or is it just that we are unable to deal with what is going on and we run to our favorite substance to make us feel different, better, hopefully, but usually worse. Do you see what I'm trying to say? If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
I don't know the exact answer to that. What I do know is that it makes me remember when my therapist, I was signed off work. My mother was by then 2.5 years into a slow decline of her death of cancer. And I remember the therapist, and by then I was on antidepressants. I was signed off work for a long period of time. I was milking it. There was part of me that, yes, I was no good. I couldn't be at work, as well as I was milking it. I was taking advantage of the situation. And I remember my first time where I didn't fully open up. I was 1 foot in. And when I was on the antidepressants, she says, it's important you don't take any other drugs. And I said, so I've been kind of coping with what's been going on with my mother and work and the anxiety and the depression and the suicidal tendencies and all the things that I flagged up as red in these tests that I was doing. And I said that I've been increasing. I'm thinking I was very smart with my words. I said, I've been increasing my intake of drugs. And she said, how much? Well, I might do a gram every other day. It's bullshit. I was on an 8-ball a day by then. And she said, she used these words. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but she used these words. She said, it's okay. That's your coping mechanism. And for me, I find it kind of is an answer to your question, because the world's not an easy place sometimes in certain moments in time. Whether you're in recovery or not in recovery, sometimes you need things, whether it's Dutch courage, whatever that meant, whether it's taking some drugs. We all need a coping mechanism to survive. And it's bizarre how it can manifest. And the reality is it was a coping mechanism in if I review it now. I went crazy on it, and look at where we are now, Silvio.
It's such an interesting concept, this, and let's just make it very clear to ourselves and to the listeners. One, it's no good taking antidepressants and street drugs at the same time.
Without question.
And two, stating the obvious here, but I've done it, you've done it, many people who will listen to this will have done it, and it's a terrible idea. And two, maybe both are right. Maybe it is true that one, we are suffering like everybody else will suffer from a trauma and from a loss and from an ongoing situation, like illness and things like that. And we don't know where to put ourselves with this like other people do. And then we use our unhealthy coping mechanisms, as you pointed out. But maybe it is equally at the same time true that we use this to excuse certain behaviors or excuse the extremities of it or something like along those lines. It's an interesting question. And it sounds a bit like semantics, but to me, it's always interesting and important to point out what is actually real, and loss and illness and those sort of things. They're real, true human emotions. Yeah, and need to be taken as such. And excuse to use, to me, always sounds like, I had a bad day at work. That would be my excuse to use. Had a bad day at work. It's been a hard week at work. I deserve a treat. That's what it feels like.
When you say that, in the end, the one thing that I do know now is that all of those things weren't actually real, and that the events and the things that I did, and my mother's illness and my choice to seek the disabled toilet to do a massive line at the hospice on the first visit, that type of shameful stuff, that's all real. But those feelings I had, they weren't real. They're not real. I'm a firm believer that they were a figment of my imagination. Just like when I was clinging on to my mum's leg at the nursery, looking at the kids and reading in an English lesson, it's a figment of my imagination, because it was not reality. It's my distorted sense of reality, which is the majority of trauma, at least my trauma. Now, I've heard other people's trauma, and, the rooms is not a trauma off. It's not one trauma over another. We all have our own experiences of that prison that we built in our head. And I think that's what binds us together, that feeling of that trauma, that feeling and that what we've created in our mind.
Yeah. So I know that, using in, really shameful places like that, and it's not a great feeling. It really isn't. At the time, it seems normal, but, it's really not great. So I really hear that. And how did it progress then into your rock bottom, if you had one, because not everybody has one, and for you to seek help and come to CA?
I never asked for help. I never admitted, really. It was always be a lie. And I knew I was in trouble because when I was signed back on to work, I'd get on the tube and I'd be sweating profusely, and I'd be hugging the underground wall. My back would be on the underground wall when I got under, and I'd be scared to get on the tube because I was scared of the track, and I'd be scared of what I might do with that once I crossed that yellow line on the underground, that splits the platform with the train itself. And I remember reaching out to a dear friend of mine that I've known since I'm 13. It was actually my first girlfriend. So I reached out to her. There were times where it would be another night where I'm driving home, it's like midnight, 1 o'clock. It'd be endless times where I want to go home, but I have this fear of going home. And at home was my wife and 2 children. And I would detour, and I honestly could not change the steering wheel. It sounds stupid. It sounds crazy. But I couldn't move the steering wheel, and I'd end up either in a car park or I'd end up in a place where I shouldn't be. And I'd get home at 6, 7 in the morning, and there were these moments where I'd be on my knees in the bathroom and I'm begging and I'm unapologetic to my wife, and I just say, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what is going on. I need help. And I know now what that was. And I've said this a number of times. I'm sure you've heard me say it. I'm not begging to my wife. I'm not begging to the children that are sleeping in the bedroom next door, and half the time they're awake, open the door sometimes. I'm begging to my higher power. I just didn't see it. And I mentioned reaching out to my friend, my first girlfriend that I mentioned, and I'd been sharing drugs with her actually for about 2-3 months, but there was this thing within me that I needed to tell somebody that I'm a drug addict. And I told her after we'd done drugs for a month or so, all platonic, rarely enough at that moment in time, all platonic in that sense, but I needed to open up to her because she knows a lot of other secrets and skeletons in my life. And she, bless her, to this day, she's a loving character, she's a loving individual, and she mentioned a rehab clinic in Bournemouth. She made me sign up to it, and I signed up to it. Other events happened then, and 3 friends pulled me out of a hotel room. I disappeared for 2 days. In the hotel room was a lot of drugs, and a bathtub, a Stanley knife, all this sort of stuff. And they pulled me out, and I remember outside that hotel, funny enough, it was in Bournemouth again, in Aylshire, Bournemouth, where I first had my first take of marijuana, my first drug.
Full circle and all that.
30 years onwards. Exactly 30 years. Probably not far off 30 years to the day. They pulled me out, and after that embarrassment, they managed to get inside the hotel room, and I said I'll be downstairs, and I'm crying under the duvet. I can't see their face. There's that shameful crying where you're hiding your face like that. You're putting your hand on your face, you don't want them to see you. You're not quite there yet when you're doing that. And I got downstairs and I saw them, and I just broke down and said, I don't know who I am anymore. I want to kill myself. I can't go home. I'm scared of my wife and kids. There's no sane reason of why I'm scared of my wife and kids. They love me and I love them. And I went to rehab a week after that rehab that my friend shared with me. And that was my first introduction to a CA room. And that was it.
Our question 4, and this, you've already alluded to it there, so let's dive just a little deeper into it. Our question 4 is, at your worst, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
I didn't know what that meant when you take these mental health assessments. They measure 4 things: anxiety, depression, well-being, and suicidal tendencies. I might be wrong on the third one, but there's 4 measurements. But the 4th one, big one. And after I'd done my mental health assessment, and I'd done about 3 or 4, they said I'm deep in the red on all of them. I didn't know, because we have those intrusive thoughts. I've always had intrusive thoughts. You know those signs that say cliff edge, beware?
Yeah.
I always want to look over the top, and I'd have images of me jumping. Is that a suicidal thought? I don't know. You know, that's just the madness in my head. Just like when I see a wet paint sign, I'll wipe it. I want to see what's underneath the wet paint. So I was always inquisitive in that way, and I've always been inquisitive about death and suicide to some degree. Yeah, in the last year and a half, it was truly on me. On the tube, I'd be scared what I'd do.
Lest you step in front of a train, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was this one time where I couldn't get home. I couldn't leave work and get home. And a dear colleague of mine sent me this number. It's basically the Samaritan's helpline that we have, work I had. And this lovely northerner over the phone, the first thing he said to me, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. I was like, what is it? Okay. And he asked me these 2 questions, and I was in a right panic. I was in a right state. And I forget the 2 questions, but one of them was, one of the question was, do I want to kill myself right now? And he forced me. He said, I'm going to ask you these questions really quickly, and I need you to answer me yes or no immediately without thinking. And he says, 1, are you in a safe place? I said, yes. I was in office. I was in an office room. 2, do you want to kill yourself? I said, no. And that in itself was what I mean by it's a figment of my imagination. Because if I spoke about it for an hour, I'm back to where I am. I want to kill myself. I'm back to where I was feeling there and then by myself with the thoughts in my head. And I did want to kill myself. And there were moments in a hotel room in a bathtub with a razor blade. There are moments on Waterloo Bridge at 6 a.m, you know? But the truth is, I don't think I had the real bollocks to actually do it. I don't think I really had the real bollocks to do it. I thought about it a lot. I flirted with it a lot. I was drawn to the stories of the ones that I had heard of suicide. It was just dark thinking in dark places with dark energy.
Yeah. Let's just be clear about a couple of things here. And the regular listeners are probably going to think, oh, he goes again. And I'm just not going to let up on it because it's important. 1, that number is in the show notes, the one that you called, you know, because it's important that we have access to it. So if you're listening to this and you have similar experiences, the number's in the show notes. 2, our illness has so many ways of killing us, okay? With cocaine in particular, heart attack first and foremost, right? Any kind of heart failure because it's so heavy on the circulatory system. 2, stroke. 3, suicide. Those are the reasons. Those are the ways we kill ourselves. And inevitably, I have found that, and that's why we need to talk about it, that in one way or another, at some point, our illness corners us to the degree that we see no ways out. We don't really see any way out. And that's when, you know, our backs, we perceive our backs to be against the wall. And then we start thinking, well, it'd be better if we weren't here, really, wouldn't it? You know, the people around us, they don't really need us anymore, do they? You know, look at me, I'm useless, aren't I? Right? And that's why that question is in there. But also that is why we have to each and every time say to the listeners, if you're in that space right now, do something about it. Speak up. Speak to anyone. Doesn't matter who it is. Just make sure that you speak to someone about this because, well, there is a way out. Yeah. Question 5. What other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms?
Yeah, I'm going to do a quick 5 seconds on what you just said there. This day and age, it's so hard for a man to admit certain things about themselves, and it's a whole other podcast in itself.
Yeah, most definitely.
Enough of the pretending. All the pretending is what kills us. So Sylvia, God bless you. Those numbers, those helplines, reaching out, asking for help. It's there's no other way really.
There is that podcast, isn't there, about male conditioning? About what goes from father to son to father to son to father, and so on and so forth. This idea that is still upheld in many, many, many ways that it's bullshit. This idea that I can't say that I'm struggling with something, or that
it's the last handbook we've got. There is no manual on how to raise a boy, how to be a man in this day and age.
What up?
Yeah. Sorry, Sylvia, but the question...
Yeah, so what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms?
Yeah, I was signed off work. I had a CBT therapist, a psychiatrist,
Okay, so let's slow it down. CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, explore that a bit for us. I'm interested.
My close experience with CBT therapists is I remember I was 31 years old and it was about a year or two and I had this position of responsibility, was seen as a sales leader in the workspace and the environment, the industry I was in. And I started getting gremlins on my shoulders in the sense of pitching and presenting in front of a large audience. And I used to be great at that. Put me on stage in front of 200 people and I was good at it. I was good at selling. I was good at that. And the cocaine started ebbing in this voice. Or whether you want to call it the devil's voice or the ego voice or the self-pity or that question of confidence. And I saw a CBT therapist to help me, I thought, with my ability to pitch and do my work and have this confidence. And it had a real negative effect. It opened this Pandora's box of insecurity. And it fucked me right up, if I'm honest with you. For 4 or 5 years, I struggled. And what I did was I doubled down. I doubled down on me running the show, manipulated things, made excuses, took more drugs. And it kind of worked, it didn't. But I found that the opening up of the CBT therapist, I blocked off to it. Then when I'm signed off with work by then, it was in pandemic. Oh no, it was about 6 months after pandemic, because that pandemic period really let me go to town with, doing whatever I liked at home and not in the workspace.
Yep.
And I'm that sort of character. I need to be monitored, honestly. I need to be monitored, But I would see these counselors, and this one lady in particular, she made me talk about my childhood. It was the first time in my life that I spoke about my childhood. It was kind of a mini step forward. And I think it was progressive and it was helpful, but I blocked it by carrying on taking the drugs and taking the antidepressants, and not telling her the truth. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And thankfully, by the time I did find CA, and the 2 weeks that I had at the rehab clinic in Bournemouth, an incredible place called the Providence. I'm not selling the Providence, but many fellows have been there. Many recovered fellows, many able fellows have been there. But in truth, it just opened the door to my first CA meeting. I paid a large sum of money. To get to my first CA meeting. None of it worked, really. None of it worked in CA because, well, we know why.
It also goes to show, though, that half measures, even in therapy, don't avail us anything, and what's interesting is that I was in therapy. I was also in marriage counseling with my wife. And, during the time when I was still using, we would not make one iota of progress. Nothing, not much at all. Certainly the way I look at it, and I think if Anna was here, she'd probably agree to some extent. And the moment I actually was sober and I was able to just be clear, right, things really started moving, and therapy was effective. Therapy gets such a bad rep because it doesn't keep us sober, but it's also because we lie, we keep doing drugs and all the rest of it, So I think it's important to point this out. But one way or another, you came to the rooms, and our question 6 is, when you came to the rooms, did you struggle with the word God?
What an amazing question. I don't think I did, in terms of my willingness, my open-mindedness, my honesty to the best of my ability, but that ability has changed over time. That's the best way I can answer it, because I never had this, thankfully, for the grace of God. And that word God itself is, again, another podcast, but I never questioned a form of higher power existing, because by the time I was into CA, in rehab, they make you do this thing, writing a life story. It is kind of like a mini step 4, 5, and you then share it in front of your other buddies that are there with you. And I remember talking about going to church. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I do go to church. And I remember I went to a secondary school that was a Church of England school, and I remember being quite a lost child from everything I mentioned when I was a child at the age of 4, clung to my mother's leg. And I remember going into church on Mondays and Fridays, a place of worship, and where you hear these scriptures and these verses and prayers, and this concept of God. It was my first real exposure to a concept of God. And I found it soothing. And I remember talking about this in my life story, because the truth is that was my higher power reaching out to me through some form. And I remember those experiences, and I remember finding that from the age of 11 to 12, before I had that first spliff in Elshire Bromwood Park, life was a little bit better, But then I chased that darkness. I chased that, live in the world of how we want to manipulate it and skew it, from 12 years old all the way through till 43, with little signs and nuggets of God reaching out to me. But I've never struggled with that concept, God. Have I chased it? Yeah. I've watched documentaries. I've looked under the floorboards, that sort of silly stuff, Maybe if I connect with God in this street at 11:12 on a Friday every week, all that sort of nonsense in my head. But yeah, I've never struggled with God, because it wherever it is, it's just kind of everywhere. It's in all people, places, things that's connected with a form of something greater than ourselves. And that's it. I don't delve too much into it. I'm still learning it. I don't ever want to know it, because I don't think it's something we can know.
And that is why our question 7 says, how do you experience your higher power today? Not how do you know it, but how do you experience it?
It's mainly through people, I would say. It's mainly through people, through conversations and connections. I'll give you the latest ones. I still have a memory like a sieve, but I can still remember the most profound engagements of God being in that room, in that car, in that conversation. 2 weeks ago, I had a fellow come around to do some step work. We were step 5, our second session, our second day, and it was 9:30 in the morning, and I'm messaging on WhatsApp a fellow and was just asking what I'm doing today. And I said, I've got somebody coming over, we're doing step 5, and he sends me a song. He sends me this song, a Carpenter's song. He sends me a Carpenter's song. What's that? I'm trying to remember. It'll be with me very quickly. We've Only Just Begun. That beautiful song. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We've only just begun. Sends me that. And I get his reference. We've only just begun doing our inventory, letting that all go. And then I'm writing my grat list, and I decide to play the greatest tracks of Carpenters in the background. And I'm writing my grat list. I'm getting deep into my gratitude list. And I think you've seen one or two of mine. I like to go deep on my gratitude. And I'm in this feeling of real warmth and gratitude for my higher power and life and the confidence of the head. And I can hear it in the background. The song in the background, it's that song, I'm on the top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I've found ever since you've been around. Your love's put me on top of the world.
Yay.
And that's God. That's God telling me there and then. I'm looking down on creation with him, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I found in my higher power. And I get in the car, it's playing, I don't say anything, and my sponsee just goes, in his Cockney Northern accent, Northern London accent, I fucking love the Carpenters, Nigel. And then he starts singing. And then I stop the car, because I picked him up from the station down the road. I stopped the car, pull him over, and I said, I've got to tell you what just happened. And I told him about that song playing in the background. And we're both crying in the car. It's Tuesday on a 10:30, Tuesday 10:30 in Archway. I picked up somebody I've only seen twice in my life, two grown men crying, and I just looked at him, I said, this shit works, done it? Only 14 months ago, we're a pair of crackheads. And we listened to the Carpenters, connecting with God there and then. And I see these signs now. I'm not saying I'm that kid in the Bruce Willis movie Sixth Sense, but we do have to a very large degree Sixth Sense now. And I remember those times when I'm down on my knees begging to God, not my wife. I remember those times when I walked into a place of worship when I was 11 and I could see a solution in front of me, but I shut the front door and instead I started to smoke weed and run the show myself for so many years. I now know those signs of those three friends that helped me and the connection of my friend giving me that rehab clinic, signing up to it and then going to it 2 weeks later. I detect those signs now and they happen every day.
Some wonderful God moments there, Nigel. Thank you. Really wonderful. Our question 8. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I never found them difficult in the first lap, let's say, of going through the steps. I did my 1 to 12. I did pause on 4. I had this phase, this little moment of chasing God. Well, if it's a spiritual program, and I'll watch these programs, I'll read these books, I'll go to these places of worship, I'll find it, the shortcut, throughout my life as an addict, I'm a firm believer that, for me at least, I relate to being an addict because I want the shortcut, I want the cheat sheet. And that was my version, I think, during the steps. But the process of itself, step 4 and 5, I loved it. It was enlightening. I was like, oh my God, I'm that. I laughed at it. There were so many moments when with my sponsor and we're laughing at the contents of my 4 and 5, the arrogance involved in it, the self-pity within it, the selfishness, the lust within it. It was comical. 10 took some time. My nightly inventory, spot check inventory, going through it in the first time around, the first month I did my nightly inventory with my sponsor rigorously for about 1.5 months, and slowly it dropped, and I'd find excuses. I had dear fellows of mine that told me that within my gratitudes that I write every day, plenty of it covers inventory, but it's not done in terms of the suggestions that we should follow. And I'm a firm believer of what we all say, isn't it? It's the suggestions we don't follow that we pay for. And thankfully, for the blessing of my God and the people that I work with in the fellowship, I'm going through step 10 with another fellow. I'm working with another sponsor who we've just started connecting. He's through the steps, but we're sharing our step 10. So in the last 2 weeks, I've been in this phase of rigorously doing my inventory on a daily basis. So it's taken time for me to I think, fully follow suggestions and the processes that we adhere to. Yeah, but no, I never really struggled with the steps, if I'm honest.
You're clearly a well more enlightened person than I am, because I struggled badly with my step 4, and I didn't think it was funny at all.
But you do now, though, don't you? Sure.
I do now, yeah, absolutely.
Good.
But at the time, the idea that I had contributed anything at all to this, was counter. It was so against the grain, so amazing to hear that someone could just kind of embrace it and kind of go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. It wasn't to me at the time, but still, even though it wasn't to me, and I took very, very seriously. I'm a very serious person. I take things very, very seriously. Even though I sort of had that experience, it was the moment the worst part of my obsession was lifted. It was after step 4 and 5, so yeah, even if you're not as cool and relaxed about it as Nigel, and if you're dead serious about it and you couldn't have possibly actually contributed anything to it, it still worked. It's beautiful. It's absolutely sensational. Question 9, which character defects give you most trouble?
Through the process, I know that my top 3 in order is self-pity, arrogance, and lust. And I'm aware of that on a daily basis. And if I don't do my 6s and 7s, and don't get me wrong, I have days where I don't do my 6s and 7s every day, they'll come back and they'll snap me. They will catch me out. They'll crop up and they'll snap me in the arse bad. And it's incredible, the self-pity one. It's the most cunning, baffling character defect. I was at a funeral of a friend of mine. His daughter died, 19 years old. Very, very sudden. I saw him the day before. His daughter died. He was fine. The next day I get a message from a friend. Have you heard about Marion? I said, no, what? I saw him yesterday. His daughter's died. Very tragic. Some form of, some sort of blood infection. CCP, 3 letters. It's always 3 letters. I forget which ones they are, but she died suddenly. And this is where the character defects I find fascinating. It stemmed from most people, if not everybody, especially ones that you know and you have a care for. It's natural, and I'm no different by saying I was in a place of empathy for my friend Mario and his family and his daughter. Who wouldn't? Even you right now, who wouldn't, right? Even the worst addict in the deepest, darkest place right now, who wouldn't? I'm in that place, and somewhere I started projecting with my own daughter. What if that was my own daughter? And that saying we have, I couldn't imagine how that feels. I can imagine how that feels, because my self-pity puts me in a place where that's my daughter, where that's me. Some do it fleetingly and some do it over a prolonged period of time. I did it long enough to cry for Mario, but then cry for myself, thinking that it's my own daughter, completely detached from reality, even though I work a pretty good program most of the time. And my selfishness, my self-pity came in. But I'm grateful for that emotion, because I know how my friend Mario feels, because I physically put myself in that place. And this is the superpower that we have as addicts. For those addicts that are really good in wrenching dry any emotion, whether it's being elated, whether it's being sad, whether it's being bored, whether it's in self-pity, whether it's in lust, you can see the flip side of the cost of it. So as long as we don't act out on it.
Mm. Thank you, Nigel. Question 10. What is the best thing recovery has given you?
Where do you stop and start a question like that? I do love you, Silvio. I really do. The fact that I can tell another man that I love them without feeling weird. I've got a tribe of people that have been missing all my life, that think just like me. We can fucking laugh how mad we are. Recovery has given me this peace of mind for a start. Peace of mind that there are thousands of people just like me. That there will be thousands of people that get to a point in their life just like us, Silvio. And we can look back at it and we can laugh. Laugh at all of that insane thinking, that problem that centers in our mind. Because forget the drugs. The drugs was just, as we know, it just sped up to our point of where we need to be. The problem centers in my mind. I'm a fucking fruitcake. I heard this in a meeting the other day, a share. It was beautiful. You take the drugs or the alcohol out of a fruitcake. What have you got left? A fruitcake. We're just a bunch of fruitcakes that aren't intoxicated anymore. And we can laugh about that. The insane things that we think, sometimes the insane things that we do, right? But none of it, hopefully, is fueled by drugs anymore.
Recovered and recovering fruitcakes.
Yeah, totally.
Very good. Very good. Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict? Now, granted, it's kind of two questions in one. One is an addict, the other one is someone wondering, one is a newcomer and the other is wondering if they're an addict. But let's roll with it.
I wouldn't have one finite answer for that, because we've got to get a sense and a gauge of what's the right thing to say to that addict at that moment in time. But very often, I just need to get through the shit and say, time to get honest. It's just time to get honest. Whatever that honesty is that they need to say, the shit they've done, the shit they've thought, the shit they haven't done, what shit they've taken. So I'm a bit excessive with the shit here. It seems to be working.
Fine.
Just get honest. What are you taking? Why are you taking it? How often? Where's it taking to you? What lives you've ruined? How bad is your life right now? Get honest. Get honest and get ready to ask if you're powerless. And if you are powerless, great, because there's a program that can work for you. It's that it is. You get to step one ASAP, really. The amount of fellas I see there procrastinating, not got a sponsor yet, not got a book, in and out of meetings. Maybe that's just their journey, that's fine. But it's just get honest. The quicker you can get honest with yourself and with a bunch of fruitcakes that are always willing to get honest in a meeting room, and you're firmly placed in that right frame of mind, honest, open-minded and willing, then you've got a solution that works. I've yet to meet one that it doesn't work for.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And our last question, our question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
I think it'd say your mother's been waiting for you. It would be one thing. It would remind me of the good things that I've done. You know, it's a big question, that. It's a huge question.
I think you've answered it really well.
Yeah. I've not spent much time thinking. I'm not one for breaking down the afterlife too much. I'm open in terms of all the viewpoints. But it does make me feel like I want to talk a little bit about how the spirit of everything is everywhere and of everyone is everywhere. Last week I was getting my tyres fixed at a friend's tyre shop. A good friend of mine was a school kid. His father owns a tyre shop, and I went to his wife's funeral. This lovely lady called Hazel. She died 87, great-grandmother, lived a beautiful life, left behind a widow. And me and Joe, he's a real alpha male, London, Cockney, dangerous sort of character. And I called him when I was at his tyre shop. He's retired now, but he rents it out. And we had a 5-minute conversation about our love for Hazel. I know she's dead in the physical body, but her spirit's still alive. Her spirit still touched me that day. Her spirit still touched Joe on a daily basis, her husband that she left behind. Her spirit is here right now as we talk about her. And they don't get lost. They're forever there.
Lovely. Thank you, Nigel. It's been a real pleasure. I mean, we know each other and I've appreciated each other's company and recovery for a while. It's been such a pleasure to have you here. You've been so open and insightful and really funny as well. I think the Hugh Grant meets Bruce Lee. I think you're not going to live that one down for a little while, you know.
Can you swap Hugh Grant with, like, I don't know, Jason Statham? I mean, he wasn't even around in the early 90s, but can we swap it?
Well, maybe in another podcast episode. This was great. Thank you so much, Nigel. It was wonderful to have you here on 12 Steps and 12 Questions. We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not-for-profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.